Hello again, fight fans. It's that time of the week again. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of April 22nd. So every year there is one fight card that I go to as a fan, and that is this Saturday. I'll talk more about the fights later in this episode, but any of you going to the StubHub Center this Saturday here in LA, get at me, let's have a beer, because I won't be working. So that means I can have some drinks. I have some family coming into town, and my cousin, his girlfriend will be going to her first boxing match. I'll be there with my brother. Of course, Tiffany will be there. So get at me. We'll have some fun at the fights. But for now, let's get into some news and notes. Finally, we have some official word regarding the big heavyweight fight coming up in a week or so, a week and a half from when I'm filming this. Vladimir Klitschko, can he do it against Anthony Joshua? 90,000 plus fans on hand. Now we know here in America that Showtime will show the fight live. So that will be on in the afternoon here in the USA. It's going to be live from London. HBO will show the tape delay later on that night. Strange, right? It sounds kind of strange the way they structured that. But look, in recent years, Vladimir Klitschko has primarily fought on HBO. So I think they had some options on him. I think they bought into this in case Klitschko pulls it off. They feel like they can use that as leverage to negotiate future fights with him and have them on HBO. But for Showtime, they're going with the favorite, Anthony Joshua, and he's been fighting on Showtime a lot. So, he has a contract with them. So they're showing it live, and should AJ win, boom, they're gonna have his fights later on as well. So it's interesting. I wonder what kind of ratings. That's what I wanna see. What's the live rating gonna look like versus the replay? I think a big part of that will come down to how good is the fight. If it's actually really, really good and there's a conclusive ending, if there's some drama in the fight, HBO's replay might do a surprisingly good rating. But if it's a dull, tactical fight, which I get this feeling it might turn into, they're gonna hurt on that replay. But it probably came fairly cheap. So that'll be interesting. But the only other news and notes, speaking of heavyweights, Luis Ortiz, he had a fight scheduled with Derek Rossi coming up, had a thumb injury, had to pull out. Luis Ortiz, man, he's just getting more and more broken up. He's obviously lying about his age. He's much older than he claims to be. I think on BoxRec it has him in his late 30s or something. Dude is pushing mid 40s, it looks like. And he's just seeming to break up more and more. For a while there, he looked like he could really be a heavyweight killer. I just get the feeling that when he finally gets his shot at somebody, maybe it's a Deontay Wilder or somebody like that, I think he might be a little too old to pull the trigger. He's gonna be too broken up. So he's out of that fight right now with Derek Rossi. And look, that was just a stay busy fight. But you break your thumb, this is boxing. You need your thumbs, right? So understandable. Hopefully he can get back in the ring at some point this summer. That's really all I got for news and notes. We got a lot of boxing to talk about. Let's review last week's action. Friday the 14th, it was the return to the MGM National Harbor, that brand new arena in Maryland in the greater DC area. Dimitri Bivol scores a TKO 4 over Samuel Clarkston. And now he's kind of the hot new thing that boxing diehards are talking about. A lot of similarities to some of these Eastern European fighters coming over here. But Bivol is 10-0 with 8 knockouts, 26 years old, had a very, very good amateur record, 268 wins, 15 losses, not quite as accomplished on the global scale as some of the other amateurs coming from that part of the world who ended up going to Olympics and winning, international tournaments. Bivol accomplishments were more local, but he did have plenty of international competition. And I mean, when you have that many amateur fights, you're obviously well advanced than his professional record shows. But still, as a pro, he turned pro in late 2014. He's only been professional for 2.5 years. Like I said, 10-0 now, and he is the interim WBA light heavyweight titleist. The full titleist is Nathan Cleverly. Don't you just love the WBA? I feel like every damn episode of TNC I'm beating up on the WBA, and for good reason. So in this fight, going back to the Clarkson fight, this was a one-sided beatdown. 2 knockdowns in the first round, 1 knockdown in the fourth, and then finally the ref called it off, and it was a good stoppage. Clarkson was game. He went in there. He showed a lot of heart, but he was just completely overmatched. So now we have the question. Does the WBA force Cleverly to fight Bivol this year? When? Is Bivol ready? I talked about the amateur career, but guys, only 2.5 years as a pro. Cleverly has been in there with everybody. He's long in the tooth. I think he'd be undersized against Bivol, who's very strong. He sits down on his punches with a lot of leverage. Every shot he was landing on Clarkson, you heard it through the damn TV. But Cleverly, older, more experienced, and when that fight comes together, it's going to be in the UK in Cleverly's backyard, or it's going to do a big crowd. And Bivol hasn't fought in that kind of situation yet as a pro. So I don't know if I was his people, if I'd throw him right into that fight next. Maybe one more fight, one more tune-up fight against a top 10, lower top 10, top 15, 175-pounder before going to Cleverly. But it comes down to the WBA. Are they going to demand that these two fight next? Or is it something that might marinate for 8-9 months, maybe even into next year? That remains to be seen. But right now, Bivol looks like a blue chipper all the way. I think he can move his head more. I think he could use more angles. He's a little more straightforward and backward, right? I'd like to see more turning and more angles. I'd like to see him moving this way and not just this way. But that's stuff that they can work on. And the more rounds he goes, the more he's going to get to work on that stuff. But this was a blowout. So I definitely want to see more of this guy. His dad is Moldovan, mother is Korean. So he's another one of these guys he's actually full Eurasian, right? Because a lot of people think Gennady Golovkin is Hapa. His mother was Hapa. Gennady Golovkin's a quarter Asian. But a lot of these guys from that part of the world are either a quarter Asian or half Asian. There's kind of this Eurasian mix. The old former Soviet Union, brought over workers from some of those Asian countries, East Asian countries. There was a lot of migration and stuff. So these guys coming up in the amateur ranks, you're going to see more guys that look like Bivol, that look like Golovkin. There's going to be more of those guys coming from that part of the world. Of course, most of them will look like Lomachenko, Usyk. But man, I'm telling you, the Eastern European invasion is in full swing right now. More of these guys are coming over and are just going to continue to base themselves in America. Now they're getting more representation here, more political power, and they're going to be fighting more on American TV and dominating American fighters. So definitely want to see more of this guy. Same thing, Friday night, we had fights here in Belasco Theater, LA Fight Club. We had an upset special. Ivan Delgado, LA-based prospect, came into this fight, 11-0 record, going up against Charles Huerta, who's lost a couple of fights, but he's been battle-tested. Huerta mopped the floor with this kid. KO3, complete whitewash. So again, you have a situation where, and this has happened a few times on these LA Fight Club cards, where Golden Boy Promotions is matching their prospects tough. Now, a few of their guys who have records like 5-0, 6-0, they're matching them very light. But they're fighters who have 10 fights or more. They tend to match them pretty tough. And we've seen a few of their prospects get flat out exposed so far, just this year recently that we can think of, right? Chimpo Gonzalez was another one that just got beat down. So let's see if Delgado can respond to this. But you got to love this win for Charles Huerta. Now it puts him in position to maybe fight on a higher platform. Maybe now he can put himself, I think he's put himself in contention for one of these Golden Boy Promotions on ESPN cards, or maybe even an HBO Latino card, something like that. So, you love to see that a guy who works really hard like Huerta get another chance and prove himself. And for Delgado, hey man, you're a prospect. You lost the fight. You can rebound from this. You just have to learn from it and sharpen some things up. We had another card here in Ontario, California, where Jesse Roman scores a 5th-round knockout to improve to 21-3. Good 140-pound prospect. Came in a few pounds over that weight, but he's pretty much a junior welterweight. So that was it with Friday action. Now on Saturday, over in Glasgow, Scotland, Julius Ndongo scores a unanimous decision victory over Ricky Burns to unify IBF and WBA junior welterweight titles. I thought this was an awesome performance. Now, some of you are upset at some of the things, I've been critical of Ricky Burns' career. Oh, and let me thank you guys for correcting me. I said he was with Frank Warren last week's episode. He used to be with Frank Warren, but of course there's that whole debacle, completely dropped the ball on that. This was an Eddie Hearn show. My mistake. Thank you for keeping me honest. It's hard because it's just me, If I had one other person here, sometimes my brother's here, somebody can correct me on stuff like that in the moment. But man, thinking of all this stuff just by myself, it's tough. So thank you again for keeping me honest. But Ricky Burns, multi-division titleist. We've talked about this a few times now, but he's kind of in that Adrian Broner territory for me, where if you look at the guys he's defeated to get those titles, and even if Jorge Linares is another one, he's had titles in multiple divisions, but if you look at the guys he's beat to get his titles, you always have to look beyond the black and white and look in that gray area. You have to look at that fine print. And in this age of just titles where they're just being handed out, right? You got to look at how are these titles won. And Ricky Burns, to me, is one of the hardest men in boxing. He's durable, he's hardworking, he's humble. He gave Julius Ndongo nothing but credit and accolades after the fight. Was totally classy in defeat. But he's just not an elite level fighter. And Julius Ndongo went out there and proved that he was not a one-trick pony or a one-shot pony, right? He went to Russia and beat Troyovsky late last year, and then he goes on the road here and outboxes and dominates. I had a 12-round shutout against Ricky Burns, a hardened veteran who's been in there with some tough fighters. For Ndongo, height, reach, he's now 22-0, 11 knockouts, 5'10", 71-inch reach, southpaw, can crack a little bit. I don't know if he has elite world-class power, but he's got above average power for that division, particularly because he's punching down with leverage and because he's a southpaw. And that's hard for a lot of guys, right? His IBF title, I think he has to fight Sergey Lipinets next if he wants to keep the IBF. I don't know if he's going to do that. Eddie Hearn has options on him. So is Eddie Hearn going to put him in there against one of his fighters next? There's been some rumors on Twitter that he might fight Anthony Crolla next, which I think would be awful. I want to see Crolla and Ricky Burns fight. I think that's a fun fight over there. And that, even as a co-feature or something, would be a very, very fun fight in the UK. But I hope Eddie Hearn doesn't screw this up and put Ndongo in there against somebody we don't want to see him against, and he ends up losing that title. I tweeted out about this. I want to see Ndongo and Terence Crawford fight next. I think that'd be an awesome matchup. I don't think it's going to happen next because of everything I just said. But if he has to go and fight Sergey Lipinets next, I love that matchup. And it's funny because I was going back and forth on Twitter. I tweeted out, I want to see Ndongo, Terence Crawford fight. Let's clean up all the titles at 140 pounds. Lipinets retweeted me and quoted it and said, nah, not the IBF. That shit's mine. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And I was like, oh, okay. Shots called. So he wants in. He wants that damn title. Either way, man, if Ndongo fights Lipinets, I want to see that. If somehow a fight can be negotiated with Terence Crawford, I want to see that. Some of you have mentioned him fighting Adrian Broner. I don't think the people at PBC are going to want to do that. But if they did, I'd love to see that one too. I just want to see the guy fight. To go into the Lion's Den twice in less than 6 months and take titles in 2 different ways. You go out there and clean a dude's clock in Russia, and then you go completely outbox and masterclass a guy in the UK. I love it. Let's see him again. Let's see him again soon. And let's hope Eddie Hearn does the right thing here. Now, Here in the United States at Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut, Sullivan Barrera scores a 5th-round TKO over Paul Parker. This was, pretty predictable. Barrera now improves to 19-1 with 14 knockouts. He came in a little overweight in this fight, but look, it was a bit of a letdown. We all wanted to see him fight Beterbiev, right? That fight, Artur Beterbiev was willing to come down to Florida and actually fight him down there, but that fell through for different reasons. But Barrera stays busy and scores a KO win here. He's still a player at 175, and I want to see him again. That was all the action for last week, though. Let's preview this week's action. Thursday, it's the return of Golden Boy Promotions on ESPN at the Turning Stone Resort in Verona, New York. Nice card here, stacked with some prospects. Michael Perez, who is coming off a loss to Peter Petrov last September. I believe that was on the Canelo, I can't think of which undercard, but right, it wasn't on the undercard, it was the night before. They fought the night before our Canelo fight, and I can't freaking think of who he fought. Was it Amir Khan? Oh, it's slipping my mind. Either way, Michael Perez is coming off of that loss, trying to get back in the win column. He's 24-2-2 lightweight. Rashidi Ellis, 17-0. Out of Massachusetts, 23-year-old. He's a blue chipper, has that look, blue chipper. He's going to be on this card as well. Eddie Gomez, 19-2, coming off a loss to Ellis last December. He's on this card. He's still a guy to keep a look at. And Vyacheslav Shabransky, coming off his loss to Barrera, who I just talked about last December. He's coming back on this card. So you have a few guys coming back off of losses, trying to get back in the win column, but they're still matched pretty competitively. And it's going to be interesting to see which guys can bounce back, which guys don't. Which guys, their mind's a little fucked. Which guys can make adjustments from those losses. And then can we see Rashidi Ellis, who I talked about before, being a pretty good looking prospect? Can he continue to roll on forward? So fun card there for a Thursday night. That's awesome, man. Thursday night boxing on ESPN. Saturday, got a lot of action. Couple cards over in the UK. Tommy Langford. He's 18-0 with 6 knockouts. 27 years old, went pro in 2012, still a prospect, going up against Advantil Kurtsaise for the interim WBO 160-pound title. Kurtsaise is 32-2-2 with 21 knockouts, 37 years old, 5'4". Probably the shortest middleweight you're ever going to see. Just like a wrecking ball. Just short, round, rolls forward. I feel bad for this guy, man. He went pro 2002. He's been around, been in some tough fights. His big breakthrough performance was last March, over a year ago. Beats Antoine Douglas, the undefeated prospect. Really, really breakthrough performance for him. Has sat on the fence ever since. He scored a 10th round TKO in that fight, man. Last March. I remember looking back. I looked back today at the schedule, and because I thought that fight was in the summer. No, man, it was in the spring, early spring last year. And Kurtsaise wanted a crack at Billy Joe Saunders, but we've talked about that whole situation a bunch. And then the WBO said, no, we're going to make Canelo Alvarez the mandatory, and there's just been all this fuckery. So now they're putting him in their interim fight. He's traveling over to the UK. Look, for Langford, some might say he's the favorite here because he's the hometown fighter. He's been more active. I think he fought late last year, I want to say. So he hasn't been very active, but he's been more active than Kurtsaise. If he can stay on the outside, avoid the power, avoid getting beat up the way Antoine Douglas did, stay on the outside, stay on the stick, just land punches, score points, tie up when you have to, he can win a decision. Right? Even if Kurtsaise lands a lot of body work and makes it interesting, I still think, again, hometown fighter, I think Langford could get a decision. But all things being considered, man, you got to favor the guy with more experience. You got to favor the battle-tested fighter. Langford's making a quantum leap in opposition here. You got to favor Kurtsaise in this fight. Here's the question. He's 37 years old. Does that layoff help him or does that layoff kill him? Sometimes with older fighters, layoffs help them. They need that extra rest. Sometimes with older fighters, they get old overnight after a layoff like that. So that's the X factor in that fight. Also, in Liverpool, on a separate card in the UK, Martin Murray taking on Gabriel Rosado. I think this is going to be a fun fight just because of the style matchup. Rosado can't be in a bad fight. Martin Murray can't be in a bad fight. But if you look at the size difference between these guys, Rosado started at 154. Then he went up to 160, was undersized in that division. Now he's going to be fighting at 168. He's lost 5 of his last 8 fights. Tough guy, always brings it. Tons of scar tissue on his face, always bleeds. Martin Murray should be the big favorite here, but it should be a fun card. Now here in the USA, in New York at Barclays, there's a Showtime card. Kicked off with Amanda Serrano taking on Diana Santana for the vacant WBO female bantamweight title. Amanda Serrano has a following out there in that part of the country, and female boxing's making a little bit of a charge here in the USA, and she's one of those East Coast female fighters making a name for herself. So that'll be interesting to watch that and see if she can continue to build upon the profile she's building out there. Jermell Charlo, not Jermall, the one that went up to 160. Jermell, the one who's staying at 154 for now, is defending his WBC junior middleweight title against Charles Hatley. So for Jermell Charlo, last fought last May, almost a year outside the ring. Young guy though. I don't think there's going to be much ring rust, maybe in some early rounds, but I don't think the layoff's going to kill him. What I want to know is, can he make weight? And what kind of drug testing is there for this fight? Because his other brother, I don't know which one's older, but his twin brother, Jermall, he couldn't make 54 no more, and he's moved up to 160. I don't think Jermell is going to stay at 154 much longer either. But he's got a guy in front of him who didn't fight at all in 2016. Last fought in 2015. This is obviously a layup. Look for Charlo to win this fight. Sean Porter in the main event, taking on Andre Berto. So for Porter, and I just did a rant video talking about the PBC, so look for that and watch it. I'm not going to go too much into this, but Sean Porter last fought last June, almost a year outside the ring. There's just this theme. Keep hearing this, right? It's so annoying. The WBA and their fuckery in fighters not fighting often. I feel like those are the two themes on the neutral corner, week in and week out. It's a plague in boxing. But Sean Porter last fought, good fight last year against Keith Thurman, and he wants to fight. Him and his dad, Kenny, they're very, very vocal. Because of the deal they signed with Al Haymon, where you really can't speak your mind, and there's kind of a hush agreement, they are real pragmatic about the way they say it. But they've made it very, very clear to us that they want to fight more. They're good guys, too. I like the Porters. Going up against Andre Berto, who's lost 4 of his last 8. He hasn't fought since last April when he knocked out Victor Ortiz at the StubHub Center. Somehow, this fight is a WBC eliminator. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me how. Sean Porter's coming off a loss, and Andre Berto beat an ancient Victor Ortiz last year. Before that, he lost to Floyd Mayweather, I believe, right? Yeah. There might have been a fight in between those. I can't remember. That's how insignificant it was. But you got one guy who's lost 4 of his last 8. You got one guy coming off a loss. Somehow, this is a title eliminator. Go figure. The WBC is in the Al Haymon business, though. Kind of like the way the WBO is in the Bob Arum business. Let's keep it real. So the winner of this fight is going to be in line to fight Keith Thurman. Now, Keith Thurman has an obligation to fight Lamont Peterson through the WBA. The winner of this fight, who I think is going to be Sean Porter. I think Sean Porter wins a clear, decisive decision in a very ugly fight. He's going to be in line to have a rematch with Keith Thurman. The PBC is smart, and they do the right thing here. They make both those fights happen this year. That's what should happen. Now, here in California, at the StubHub Center, Top Rank's putting on a card they are producing their own pay-per-view here. It's $45 for those of you who are asking. $45. And I think it's worth it, man. I think that this is a stacked card. As far as I know, they're going to stream every damn fight. It's not just going to be like the top 4 fights. They're going to stream everything. So for $45, you get to see Shakur Stevenson make his pro debut in a 6-rounder. You get to see Gilberto Ramirez going up against Ukrainian Max Bursak to defend his WBO super middleweight title. For Bursak, this is his first fight in the USA. He's well-traveled. He's fought everywhere, pretty much as an opponent. but this is his first fight in the USA. You also get Jesse Magdaleno going up against the Brazilian Adilson dos Santos to defend his WBO bantamweight title. And for Dos Santos, Brazilian, his first fight in America too. Those are kind of layups. Gilberto Ramirez was supposed to have a better opponent. Some things fell through. It's not really on him. But this main event is a good one, man. Oscar Valdez going up against Miguel Marriaga to defend his WBO featherweight title. For those of you who don't know much about Marriaga, he's 25-1 with 21 knockouts, hard-hitting Colombian. He's a bigger guy, stronger guy, the naturally stronger puncher, more experienced. This is going to be the sternest challenge that Oscar Valdez has had so far in his career. We've seen him pass every test, even when he's had some bumps. He got dropped in that fight against, I can't remember, Ruben Tamayo on the undercard of Bradley Vargas at StubHub Center. I was there for that one and saw the look on his face and saw his corner. I was actually sitting in Timothy Bradley's corner that night because I was shadowing the commission. And I remember just seeing the look in his eye, and there was a little bit of panic, but he calmed himself, and I thought he did what he had to do. He kind of grew up in that fight. And since then, we've seen him grow up a little bit more. This is going to be a big, big lesson for him. This is going to be a big one, man. So if he can win this fight, he's a star in the making. But Marriaga is going to challenge him, and there's a very live dog, and is going to put some leather on him. And Valdez is not hard to hit. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when he takes that first hard punch. I think that this is a sleeper here, man. This is a good fight that a lot of people are sleeping on. Should be some good action. Combined records of these top three fighters. Ramirez is 34-0. Magdaleno's 24-0. Valdez is 21-0. I think these guys combined, 89-0. All right, this is my math off. 79-0. That's impressive, man. These guys are future stars, right? Maybe not crossover superstars, whatever, but they're going to be in the mix for big fights down the road. If you look at Magdaleno at bantamweight, there's big fights to be made there. He moves up a few pounds, 122, big fights to be made. Valdez is in a loaded division at 126. He moves up to 130 eventually, ton of fights there. Gilberto Ramirez, they're already talking about, K2 Promotions is talking about eventually matching him with Gennady Golovkin when Triple G's done with business at 160, right? So all these guys are going to be in big business down the line. So I think this is going to be a fun card. I'm going to be there with my family. So come have a beer with me. You're paying. I'm Michael Montero. I always say I'll see you at the fights, and now I really will. So come out there to StubHub. I'll see you at the fights. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. That's it for this week.